What is up, everybody? Welcome to the MMA Engine and welcome to the new show. We have Prop Ability, the UFC 273 prop betting breakdown. And I was telling Weezy before, I'm so excited to do a show like this because there are hundreds of shows out there with, betting analysis, in terms of that stuff. But there are no shows out there in terms of the data, in terms of trying to find betting lines that are inaccurate. And, shout out to Weezy. He's worked really, really hard on this sheet, not days, not weeks, but months on this sheet. And it's looking really good. And what I will say is we are in the process of working on the graphics. We're working on able to better, show you guys stuff on the screen and stuff. But it's going to get better and better each week. So really excited for this show. Weezy, are you excited for this show as well?
I got to tell you, man, I'm so excited for this because I've been working on this template. It's been in my head, and the thought of how I was going to put this thing together, how I was going to create a spreadsheet that it would allow everybody that pays attention to us for analysis, a way going forward that we could actually quantify some value, because people talk about value, but what does it mean? I think everybody has a different opinion of it, but there are definite ways when we look at props and how we want to price them and what we want to pay for them. There are ways to find out if we're paying too much or if we're underpaying. And just like anything in life, Brady, you want to underpay for shit. You don't want to overpay for it. Let somebody else overpay for it. Let somebody else overpay for it when you're the seller, right? We want to be the seller when somebody's overpaying, and we want to be the buyer when somebody's underpaying. It's just like a stock market. And I used to trade. I used to work on the floor of the Chicago Stock Exchange. So I've been struggling with this thing, this data-driven way to kind of try to identify value in fight doesn't go, fight goes, over 2.5, under 2.5, over 1.5, under 1.5. And what we're doing is I've taken every single division. I've sorted out all the fights by division. I've cut out all the 5-round fights. So what I have in this prop template that we're looking at today, Brady, from women's 115 pounds to men's 265 pounds, I have every fight that was 3 rounds between 2013 and last week. And then I have the analytics for every division by year and overall. Fight goes to decision. Fight doesn't go to decision. Over 2.5, under 2.5, everything. And then what we're going to do is we're going to compare the two fighters and their combined stats against the divisional finish rates and against the implied probabilities of the lines. We're going to do subtractions and additions, and we're going to find out when we're getting a better price than what the statistics are telling us the price should be. So I know that's a long explanation, but since I'm the guy that put this together, I feel like I owe that to everybody here. It looks like a lot, but we're going to figure out how to display this going forward and try to give you guys the best in analytics to help you make the best and most reasonable gambling decisions you possibly can on mixed martial arts.
Let's do it. Yeah, very excited for this show. I'm a guy that loves my overs, especially my unders, and my fight is a good decision. So this is kind of my show. I'm looking forward to it. I do want to shout out the chat quickly before we get started. We got Chris in here. We got Daz in the chat, Peter in the chat, Effie and Bruce. Thank you all for hanging out. If you guys can please leave a like, subscribe here to the MMA Engine. Weezy put together this next level sheet. You can only see this on the MMA Engine, so make sure you are subscribed. But I say we get right into it, and we'll start with the very first fight of the night. We have Daniel Santos going against Julio Arce. The over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 rounds is minus 160. The under 2.5 rounds is plus 130. The fight goes to decision is also minus 160. And the fight doesn't go to decision is plus 130. This is on Bet Online. Weezy, what's sticking out to you on this one here?
Okay, so when we look at this sheet, we're looking at green and red, right? And then the yellow is the stuff that's right in the middle. If we're seeing something yellow, it means it's fairly priced. So right over here, what I've got highlighted is the overall finish rates in wins, losses, and then we combine the wins and the losses. And we do it for fighter A, which is Julio Arce, fighter B, which is Daniel Santos, and then the two of them combined. And what we're doing is like right here where I'm at, we see that Julio Arce in this little square here has finished 10 of his 17 wins inside the distance. Daniel Santos has finished 5 of his 8 wins inside the distance. So these guys combined have finished 15 of their 25 combined wins inside the distance. That's 60%. The divisional finish rate is 49.43%. So these guys are finishing at a rate that's 10% better than the divisional finish rate in the UFC. And the implied probability of the line, the fight doesn't go to decision, at plus 130 is 43.48%. Well, these guys are finishing at a 60%. So we're getting really 16.5% better than the line when we compare the finish rates of Arce and Santos combined. So when we see these green areas here, right, it's telling us that there is value in the fight doesn't go to decision line when you compare it to the combined wins of Arce and Santos. And then the losses, we see that only 2 of 6 losses have come inside the distance for these two guys. So they're fairly difficult to finish. And then when we look at the combined, we see 17 of 31 of their fights have finished inside the distance. That's 55%. Versus the divisional finish rate, that's 5% better. And versus the implied probability of the line, that's 11% better. And then when we look at the UFC finish rates, which isn't going to be as helpful in this case, Brady, because we don't have any data for Daniel Santos, we will see that Arce is finishing at a fantastic rate. 4 of 5 fights, he's 30% over the divisional finish rate, and he's getting finished in only 1 out of 3 losses, so that's 16% less than a divisional finish rate. So it looks like the fight doesn't go to decision is where the value is when we look at the overall finish rates of both fighters. And when we go to the fight goes to decision data down here, we see that in the losses, it's actually a pretty good rate because both of these guys have been difficult to finish. But in terms of winning, both these guys aren't going to decision very often. So what it's telling us is that there's probably a little more value in that fight doesn't go to decision line at plus 130 at an implied probability of 43.48%. And that's because Arce is a very good finisher, and he's finished 4 of his 5 UFC wins inside the distance. And Santos is a 62.5% finisher in his outside the UFC experience. So that's also pretty good, better than the divisional finish rate inside the UFC. So this sheet is telling us right now that there's a little bit of value in that under, and the fight doesn't go.
Dude, this show is freaking awesome. I'm gonna have fun doing this each week. I mean, that's great. So on Bet Online, actually, the fight doesn't go to decision is plus 130. That is like by far the best price out there. On FanDuel, it's minus 110. On DraftKings, it's plus 100. So Bet Online is hanging a plus 130, and I don't really think that's going to be there much longer. It looks like money's coming in on these fight doesn't go props, Weezy.
Yeah, as they should be, because when you got a guy that's finished 4 of his 5 fights inside the distance and he's down a weight class, right? Mm-hmm. This is something that we can expect to see probably a finish here. And oftentimes when these debutants come in their first fight, we will see those fights go to or finish inside the distance more times than not. So yeah, it's looking like the value here is going to be on that under for this particular fight, my man.
Sounds good to me. Let us move on to the next fight then. We have Kay Hansen going against Piera Rodriguez. We have the fight doesn't go sitting at plus 155. The fight goes to decision sitting at minus 190. The over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 rounds is minus 225. And the under 2.5 rounds is plus 185. Weezy, what's sticking out on this one here?
Okay, so when we're looking like the Santos Arce fight and then this particular fight, we've got to pay more attention to the overall finish rates than the UFC finish rates because Piera Rodriguez is making her debut, just like Santos was making his debut in the previous fight that we talked about. So right now, in terms of finishing fights, we see that Piera has finished 5 of 7 of her fights, and Kay has finished 6 of 7. So 11 of 14 fights of their wins have finished inside the distance. That's 78.6%. And we're talking about versus the divisional finish rate, that's 30%. So these girls are finishing at a much better rate than the finish rates of the normal UFC straw weight. So, but also Kay Hansen has lost 5 fights, and she's only been finished once, and that was the first loss of her career. So she's very durable. So we can see that in the wins, it likes the fight doesn't go to decision here. But in the losses, It doesn't, because Kay's very durable, and because Piera Rodriguez has never lost, we don't know if she's able to be finished or not. And then we look at the combined numbers, we still see some really good things here, but we got to remember that the overall finish rates outside the UFC are gonna usually be higher than they will be in the UFC when you're seeing the highest level of competition. If we scroll down here, we see a lot of red for the decision rates, for the fight goes to decision. So what this is telling me here for the combined and for the wins is that this is something that probably, I mean, it feels to me like this fight probably will go to decision. But when we look at the UFC decision rates, we see like these light green numbers here on this lower right of the screen, right? We see 3 of 4 of the combined fights have went to decision, right? And this one is telling us that that's 5% better than the divisional rate, which is about 70%. And it's 9.5% better than the implied probability. So when we look at the UFC numbers, because we do have the Piera Rodriguez Contender Series fight, and we've got 2 decision wins here for, 2 decision fights going to decision for Hansen, that we don't have a lot of data. We're seeing a lot of red and green on both sides. So it's telling us that the line is actually probably fairly priced. But just in terms of the UFC finish rates, we see a little more green down here than we do up here, which leads me to believe that the fight goes to decision is the bet. And there's a fight goes that's hanging out at about minus 172 right now on FanDuel. And that, my friend, is where the value is screaming right now.
Yeah, so I did my best bet article Wednesday, and that's what I put. I put the fight goes to decision at minus 172 on FanDuel. Like, and then like you said, like you could hedge with like a Kay Hansen 3rd round submission prop, right? I know you like that. So yeah, that minus 172 is the best price you can get across the board. You got minus 190 fight goes on Bet Online, and then minus 190 on DraftKings. But that minus 172 is kind of sticking out to me for sure.
It looks like a good line, and we've never seen Kay Hansen finish or we've never seen her be finished in a loss. And she did get a 3rd round finish against Jin Yu Fry. And as we know, 4 out of those 5 finish wins have been in the 3rd round. And I've said it like 4 times this week. She was about 2 seconds away from subbing Magdalena Sormova in the 3rd round as well, but she ran out of time. So she could have 5 3rd round submissions, but she does have 4, and that's at only 7 wins.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you do want to bet this over, I think you just you can hedge it with a Kay Hansen 3rd round sub, and that's going to be like 24-1. So you could play this. It's a playable line right now as an over.
Yeah, or even like a Hansen sub prop, but to hedge it, and the Hansen sub's like plus 460 as well. So that's
even
pretty
better.
Cool.
Yeah, that way if she gets something in the 1st or 2nd round, and we know how tricky she is on the ground, it's just that she's gotten her subs late doesn't mean that she can't get one early here. So that's a better way to be safe about it.
Yeah, for sure. But we'll keep moving on. And I think we might have some violence here. I believe this is the biggest fight doesn't go to decision prop on the entire card. We have Anthony Fluffy Hernandez going against the newcomer. We have Josh Fremd. I cannot wait for this fight. I think this is probably the biggest sleeper fight on the card, and it's on the prelims, the early prelims. I think this is going to be a war for as long as it lasts, and I cannot wait for this one. We see the over-under is set at 1.5 rounds. The over 1.5 is plus 110. The under 1.5 is actually juiced to minus 140. We see the fight goes to decision sitting at plus 300, and the fight doesn't go to decision on Bet Online minus 400, but on FanDuel it is minus 750. Weezy, what do you think about this banger?
Yeah, see, so sometimes you see these situations where the books will just open a fight doesn't go to decision line at nearly an unbettable line. And you say, oh, shit, they did it. I wanted to bet violence here, and it just wasn't available. And then you look, and according to my model, there's value here still on the fight doesn't go to decision. That's how violent these two guys are. Look at that. 14 of 17 wins combined for these two gentlemen are finished inside the distance, and that's 82%. And over the divisional finish rate, that's 27% better. So that's a big number. But you're still actually getting 2.4% better than the implied probability of the line than the combined finish rates of 82.4% here. But the line probability is coming in at 80. So it's still actually 2.4% better. So currently it seems like you're overpaying for this line, but in reality, it's fairly priced. You know, we see a lot of green up here, a lot of green right here, and then I'm in some yellow, which means you're right, you know, you're within 3% either way. And then when you scroll over here to the UFC finish rates, you know, we don't have much. Unfortunately, we've only got 2 fights here for Hernandez and Fremd, once again making his debut. So we kind of have to rely once again on the left side of the chart because we have more data over there. And we see here for the fight goes to decision, a lot of red, you know, because these guys, only 4 of 22 of their combined fights have went to decision. 4 of 22. That's, you know, that's 22%, you know, and that's 22% below the divisional finish rate and 2.3% below the implied probability. So this line is dead on, Brady. It's one of these lines that's really fairly priced. They didn't give us any chance to get in there like minus 250 and get value over them because they're looking at these same numbers that we are all looking at right now on this show. These are how these bookies are figuring out their lines. And we're figuring them out, Brady. We're going to fucking start taking their money because this isn't that difficult to understand. And if I have to be the one to teach it to all you guys, that's what I'm going to have to do because we need to stack cash tickets like flapjacks. I'm sick of giving these pricks my money. So let's look at these analytics. And right now, the analytics are telling us that Vegas is priced this beautifully.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that, Weezy, because I do have a parlay with the under 2.5 in this fight. I think this fight does finish, and yeah, minus 400 on Bet Online, minus 750. I'm curious, would there be value on that 750? That's an 88.2% probability that it does finish.
88.2. So like against the line for the combined finish rates of both fighters, we have 80. So it would be like actually overpriced by about 8% at that price. So yeah, that's definitely overpriced. But it's kind of crazy how when you go from minus 500 to minus 750, the amount of percentage of implied probability actually isn't that much.
Yeah, so there probably is honestly value on that fight. Doesn't go to decision at minus 400 on Bet Online, but that is the best price across the board. I see minus 450 on 5 dimes, minus 500 on FanDuel, and on Bet Online, I don't believe you can parlay props. So I guess that's why Bet Online probably has their minus 400. But on FanDuel, DraftKings you can, and that's probably why we see it at minus 750, minus 500. They do not want you parlaying that because it probably does finish inside the distance. But yeah, that is going to be some violence, and I say we more than likely get some more violence here, Weezy, with this next fight. We have Aleksei Oleinik going against Jared Vanderaa. And in my opinion, this is another sleeper fight. I think this is one of my favorite fights on the card. It's weird. It's going to be completely hilarious. Aleksei Oleinik fights are always very unique. And Jared Vanderaa is unique in his own right as well. So we have the over-under is set once again at 1.5. The over 1.5 is minus 120. The under 1.5 is minus 110. The fight goes to decision is plus 290, and the fight doesn't go to decision is minus 375. This is on Bet Online. Weezy, I'm really curious to hear what the numbers say here because this was something that I had circled, violence. But once I saw the price, I wasn't that interested. So let's hear it.
Yeah, so let's go right here for the fight doesn't go to decision, and we're going to go for the combined records of Oleinik and Vanderaa because my God, do we have a fantastic sample size here of 95 fights, right? You don't see that very often, but we got 95 fights here, and 79 of 95 fights between these two gentlemen have finished inside the distance. That's 83.2%. Now, 63.47% finish in the heavyweight division. So that's 20% better than the divisional finish rate. And it's actually, even at minus 375, Brady, that 79 out of 95 at 83.2% is still 4.2% better than the implied probability of the line that the fight doesn't go to decision. But because we got some fights here for both of these guys, right? We got 10 total fights. We can look at these combined numbers for the UFC finish rates, right? 15 of 20 of these guys combined fights have finished inside the distance. That's 75%. That's 11.5% better than the divisional finish rate of 63%. But we see that the line is just a little bit overpriced here at about 4% in terms of the combined UFC finish rates for both of these guys. We're actually overpaying on that minus 375 by about 4%, right? And then if we go down here to the fight goes to decision, we see that This line is actually priced just about perfectly. 5 of the 20 fights haven't or have been to decision, which is 25%. And the implied probability of that line is 24.94%. So it's actually perfectly priced. You know, when we see this number here, this implied probability, it says negative 0.006. It's basically saying that the implied probability of the line matches exactly how many fights went to decision in the combined UFC careers of Vanderaa and Oleinik. So another one, Brady, that Vegas has beautifully priced here. When we look at these UFC numbers, because they're robust enough, we do have 10 of them. We see a lot of yellow. We don't see a lot of green, and we don't see a lot of red. It's just an indication of a line that's right where it's supposed to be.
Yep, sounds good to me. I did see a lot of people, taking a shot on the fight starts round 2 at -128, which, it's going to be terrifying, but, -128 for the fight to start round 2 is not bad, right?
Yeah, so that would be -120 is like a 54% implied probability. So, you're basically saying it's like a coin flip, whether it happens or not, and you're paying a little bit better than a coin flip. It's like saying, it's not important, but yeah, it's fairly priced though, because you look at Oleinik's fights, these guys' fights are finishing inside the distance quite a bit, and even the under 1.5 in the heavyweight division, that's happening 44% of the time. The under 1.5, so yeah, that's another line that appears to be fairly priced.
Sounds good. Looks like they did a good job. I know we both have bets on this fight, but from a different standpoint there. So, yeah, we'll keep moving on. We have the next fight on the card, and I believe we have, Aspen Ladd going against Raquel Pennington. So we have Aspen Ladd.
I think we got Gall Malott, actually.
Okay, Gall Malott. I'm going off the best fight odds. It might be a little bit different there, but
okay, yeah, they're actually switched. So
okay.
We'll go Gall Malott here first.
All right, sounds good. Gall versus Malott, even better. Some more violence here. So we have the over/under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 plus money plus 140. The under 2.5 rounds is -170. The fight goes to decision is plus 200. The fight doesn't go to decision is -260. So I do have a bet on this fight. I actually have a bet on the fight doesn't go to decision. This is one of the 3 fights I did research last week, and that fight doesn't go to decision line at -170 really stuck out. But over the last week and a half, it has been pounded, and I'm curious to see if it's rightfully so been pounded, Weezy.
Well, so now we've got another situation here where we've got Malott basically making his debut, right? So we only have one UFC fight, and it's a Contender Series fight, and it lasted, 30 seconds? So we have to kind of look at the overall finish rates in comparison to the UFC finish rates here, right? So at the current line, right, 8 of 9 of Malott's fights have finished inside the distance, 7 of 11 of Gall's fights. So that's 15 out of 20 fights, 75%. That's 26.6% better than the divisional finish rate in the UFC. And it's at the current line of -260, you're actually still getting about 2.8% value in terms of underpaying by about 2.8% of the implied probability, what it should be if you were pricing it based on this metric, right? So it looks like the line got bet up to -260, which is right about where it should be. Maybe -270, maybe -275 would be even more fair. But you got it at -170. Tell me what the implied probability of -170 is. Can you get that for me right now?
I sure can. I have it right up. -170. Implied probability is 63%.
So 63% is 12% better than 75%. So that would say that you getting in at that line, you got in 14.5% better than where you should have gotten it, right? So that's beating line movement. That's nabbing value early and then letting the rest of the value bettors bet that up to where it should be. Because with Malott, you got a guy who's got 1 draw, and then every other fight has finished inside of a round and a half. So he is a killer be killed fighter. So you automatically like fight doesn't go to decision when one of those fighters is like an Anthony Hernandez type, an Abdul Razak. Well, he's went to decision a few times. These guys like Randy Costa, they're kill or be killed.
Yes.
They go in there and they really don't ever see a third round. You always want to be invested in those fight doesn't go, because it changes the way that the other guy fights. The other guy might be conservative, but it's impossible to be conservative against a wild man. So, it's a situation where this is telling us, it's screaming to us that the value initially was at fight doesn't go, and now it's been priced up. And look at all this red down here on fight goes to decision. See this here in the wins? Yeah. That shows you that these guys are savage finishers. So, you really don't want to bet that, that the fight's going to go to decision, because these guys are finishing crazy. And 3 of these guys, 5 fights have went to decision at 60%. So that's a little bit better than the implied probability. But keep in mind, there's a lot of UFC fights in there for Gall. So we see it up here in Malott with the red. We see it up here. And then with Gall, he has lost 3 of 4 inside the distance. 1 of 4 inside the distance. 3 of 4 have went to decision. So there's a little bit of green there. But right when we price it here, we see a lot of red. So it looks like that fight doesn't go to decision is the bet, but it has been kind of bet to where there's not a lot of value left in that line. But you beat it.
Yep, that means it's going to lose, right? No, I hope not. But
sometimes that's how it goes, man.
It all depends. If Keith Peterson's reffing, then it probably does lose. But if not, it should be good there. But Thomas saying violence. I like, these are my kinds of bets. Thomas, this is going to be the show for you. Thank you for stopping by, Thomas. I say we go on to the next fight here. And we have Raquel Pennington going against Aspen Ladd. Should be a pretty good fight here. We have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. We have a very juiced over 2.5 rounds at -325. The under 2.5 rounds is +250. The fight goes to decision -280, and the fight doesn't go to decision is +220. Weezy, assuming this fight probably goes to decision, right?
Yeah, I mean, in this division, the women's 135-pound division, only 35.62% of fights finish inside the distance. So that means almost 65% of fights go to decision. So right there, fight goes to decision is something you're probably going to be paying at least -200 for. Right. So that's something you always have to keep in mind. And we're seeing -280 here. So, we have to really be sure that these ladies finish way less than what the division does. Right. So let's just go right over here to UFC finish rates right away, Brady, because we can see 14 total fights for 21 total fights combined for Pennington and Ladd in the UFC. How many of them finished inside the distance? 8 of them did. So that's a 38% implied probability. So actually, when you add up Ladd and Pennington, they're actually finishing at a little bit better rate than what the division is, right? So we don't want to be paying necessarily more than -200 here. But versus the divisional finish rate, we see that's about 2% better than the divisional finish rate for the fight doesn't go to decision. And here we see that, yeah, they are overpricing the fight goes to decision, because we're seeing about 6.8% value for this fight not to go to decision, because Aspen Ladd has had 4 of 6 fights not go to decision. While for Pennington, it's only 4 out of 15. So here we have a situation where we have one lady whose fights are finishing at a 66% clip, and the other one is finishing at about a 26% clip. So, it's going to meet somewhere in the middle. Does Aspen Ladd make Pennington fight with a little more urgency? And that potentially could be the case. Aspen Ladd is pretty aggressive, So this is telling us here that the value, you guys, is going to be in the fight doesn't go to decision, right? Because when we go down here, we see we're overpaying on the 13 of 21 fights that have went to decision between Ladd and Pennington. That is 2.5% worse than the divisional finish rate, and 11.8% worse than what we're paying for the implied probability of the line. So, yeah, even if you think this is going to decision, you're overpaying for it at this current line. Don't pay more than -240 for this.
Yep, sounds good. And that's not even like factoring in like the Aspen lad weight cut. Is she going to come in and look like crap? Is she going to cry on scale and the scales as well? So, yep, I like it. I like it. I like it. Let's keep moving on. We have the next fight on the card, and it looks like it's going to be. Do we have Rozenstruik next?
Biggie boy.
Oh, we have Rozenstruik going against Tybura. I'm looking forward to see what the data says here, honestly, because this was one of the fights I did research last week. I saw the fight doesn't go to decision sitting at minus 155. I thought, okay, I'll look into it. Ended up not pulling the trigger, and maybe I should have, because we see the fight doesn't go to decision now at minus 240 on Bet Online. The fight goes to decision at plus 190. The over under is some books have over 2.5. Some books have 1.5. I'll say the over under is mostly set at 2.5. The over 2.5 is plus 120, and the under 2.5 is minus 150. Weezy, what is sticking out here?
Well, so we got to always keep in mind when we're talking about heavyweight fights that they are finishing at about a 63.5% clip for 3-round fights. So, when you're betting fight doesn't go to decision, you are going to be probably paying around minus 190, right? Just if they're right around those normal divisional finish rates. So we've got Rozenstruik and Tybura here, right? So we've got a good sample size of UFC fights. So let's go to the right side of the page and look at the UFC finish rates. Combined wins and losses. 14 of 24 fights have finished inside the distance between Tybura and Rozenstruik. Rozenstruik's fights are finishing at about 78%. And it's about 47% for Tybura. So 58.3% is about 5% less than the divisional finish rate of 63.5%. And the implied probability is 12.3% that we're overpaying for this line. So right now at minus 240, this is not a good line because, like we say, Tybura's fights are finishing inside the distance less than half the time. So to pay a 70.5% implied probability for the fight, you're basically saying Rozenstruik's winning this fight no matter what. But, we could tell by the lines that, Vegas is only giving Rozenstruik about a 60% chance to win this fight. So right now, this looks like this fight goes to decision at plus 190 is going to be where the value is. And here's what the spreadsheet's telling us. Since 10 of the 24 combined fights between these guys have went to decision, that's 41.7%. That's 5% better than the divisional finish or goes to decision rate of 36% for the heavyweight division, and a 7.2% value right here for the fight goes to decision. It's 7.2% better than what we could expect it for the line. So, once again, you're going to find this a lot, you guys. And when you go to Bet MMA Tips and you look at over bets and under bets, here's a very interesting statistic. If you bet the under on every fight in 2021, you would have wound up ahead something like 10 or 15% on return on investment. Now, that's ridiculous. You would not think that would happen, right? But there's a reason that that's happening, and here's what it is. Fight doesn't go to decision lines are always overpriced, especially in the 185-pound, 205-pound, and 265-pound divisions. Because, Brady, do you like betting overs?
No, I don't know.
Why?
It takes years off your life, basically.
Exactly. It's fucking hard to bet overs as a gambler, right? Because you're watching the fight. It's a mixed martial arts fight. These people are trying to kill each other, and you're saying, slow down, take it easy, take a deep breath, right? But the psychology that goes along with that is going to make Vegas overprice the lines that don't take years off your life. So we always have to keep that in mind. This is why we created this show, to find value. And right now, we're going to find it, and we're going to see it every single week that sometimes, unless you beat these bookies and get these opening lines, that it's going to be hard to find value at fight doesn't go to decision. We got to find them early. But right now, it's telling us you might as well bet the over here because that's where the value is in comparison to how these fights go to decision.
Yeah, and the reason I like this show so much is because you can break it down, any way you want. But when you look at the data, like the data does not lie. And I have a bet on Rozenstruik by KO, but that plus 190 for the fight to go to decision, that is really sticking out on Bet Online. That is the best price by far. I see plus 150 on FanDuel. I see plus 150 on DraftKings, but plus 190 on Bet Online for the fight to go to decision. You got to think there's some value on that. Although it's going to be terrifying, I think Rozenstruik probably knocks him out, but plus 190 is very tempting at that price tag.
Yeah, it is. It is a very interesting bet. And, just in terms of value, doesn't mean you have to bet it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't, because do you really want to bet Rozenstruik Tybura fight goes to decision and then have to hope that Jairzinho doesn't land a big shot? It will take years off your life. It doesn't mean that you have to bet it, but at least it's telling you when you want to bet something. I want to bet this under. This sheet will tell you, hey, you might be overpaying for it. You might still want to bet it, because just because the divisional finish rates and the implied probabilities of the lines are here and here, every fight is independent. Every fight takes place on its own. It doesn't have anything to do with the fights that took place before it. But those benchmarks exist for a reason. At the end of the day, usually everything comes back to the mean, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that mean.
Yep, we're trying to find that probability, and that's what show we're on right now. You guys can like the show, subscribe here to the MMA Engine. We'll be going live every, what's today, Thursday? It's Thursday, right?
Yeah, it's Thursday.
Sometimes you lose track of the days. Every Thursday, so make sure you are subscribed so not miss out on it. I'm enjoying the show so far. Hopefully you guys are as well. Let us move on to the next fight, and we have Darian Weeks going against Ian Garry. Cannot wait to hear your thoughts on this one, Weezy, and see what the data says here, because I've been looking at a bet, the past 2 weeks. I've had my finger over it the last 2 weeks. Let's see if it backs up what I'm kind of thinking here. So the over-under is set at 1.5 rounds. The over 1.5 is minus 170. The under 1.5 is plus 140. The fight goes to decision, plus 135, and the fight doesn't go to decision is minus 165. This is what I'm really curious to hear about, Weezy.
Okay, so we see a lot of green over here on overall finish rates, and unfortunately, that's what we have to look at. We'd always prefer to look at UFC finish rates when we have a good sample size of UFC fights between the two fighters, and usually we want both fighters to have over a certain amount of fights, right? Because that's when we can rely more on the data. But here we've got Garry with only 8 pro fights and Weeks with only 5, so 13 professional fights to deal with. What it's telling us here in the wins is that these guys are savage finishers. 100% finish rate for Weeks, 75% finish rate for Garry, 84.6 combined finish rate, right? But the problem is that we've only got one loss between the two of these guys, right? So we don't really know whether these guys are incredibly durable or not. Now, Weeks, we've got to believe that this dude is pretty durable, right? He went 3 rounds with Bryan Barberena on 48 hours notice, won the second round, and he won the last 30 seconds of the third round too. So the dude's got conditioning, the dude's got heart, and he's obviously training hard if he can go a full 3 rounds with Bryan Barberena on short notice in his debut. But because these guys are such good finishers, it's going to show that this fight doesn't go to decision is the best bet, because they're finishing at an 85% rate. The implied probability that the fight doesn't go to decision is 62. So we're talking about a 22.4%, advantage over that implied probability. So that's telling us something, right? But what's keeping us from pulling the trigger is the fact that we don't know how durable both of these guys are, right? If Weeks wins, we haven't seen Garry really face a lot of adversity yet. Is he going to quit if it starts going bad for him? Is he just going to tap out easily? We don't know any of that shit. So it's not much of a sample size here, but based on the wins and based on the combined overall finish rates, and when we scroll down here, we see a lot of red here for fight goes to decision, right? And we see a lot of green here for fight doesn't go to decision. But the losses are the thing that worry me. I'd like to see a couple losses on fighters' records to know whether if they're durable or not, because sometimes that's even more important than the wins. Is you'd rather have 2 quitters in there than 2 savage finishers if you're looking for a fight doesn't go to decision, because all it takes is 1 quitter. So that's how I'm looking at this. So I see value in the fight doesn't go, But the missing piece of information is the durability of both fighters, because we only have one combined loss between the two of them.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm struggling, because Weeks in his amateur career as well, like Weeks has never been finished in his entire career. Seems like a really tough guy. And then in terms of Garry, like you said, we don't really know the durability. But what I was kind of looking at throughout the week is that over 1.5, and it's a very popular play this week. So popular that I guess you're right. Like the value at this point is probably on that fight doesn't go to decision. The fight doesn't go to decision opened up on 5 dimes at -230 on March 27th. And it is bet all the way to -155. So money's been pouring in on the fight goes all week. The money's been pouring in on these overs all week. And if it keeps happening, maybe fight doesn't go to decision, gets like close to plus money. I don't think it gets to plus money, but maybe close, -135, -125. At that point, you might be interested in it, right?
Yeah, because you're talking about 11 of 14 combined fights from these guys have finished inside the distance. That's 78.6%. In wins and losses. So, like 78.6%, and you're getting an implied probability of 62 right here on the fight doesn't go. That's 16%. But if you're talking, that goes down to plus 100, for instance, then you're talking about something like, 28%. That's an auto bet. You got to make those bets because it's just mispriced and it's a mixed martial arts fight. Just because a bunch of people think a fight's going to happen one way, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen that way. And when those benchmarks and those implied probabilities are way away from the percentages that these fighters are finishing or not finishing, it's telling you that there might be some value on one side or the other.
Yep, sounds good to me. I can't wait to see where that line does go. It might be interesting to take a look at it, maybe on fight day. If that fight doesn't go, keeps moving. We got Josh saying he's liking the under in this fight. We got Lou Betcha, shout out to Lou, saying trap fight, and it kind of feels like it, right? And then we have Daz saying over 1.5s are always fun. I take them every heavyweight, even heavyweight fights. Daz, me and you have a different opinion on fun. I would just be sweating the whole time, but I bet you hit a lot of those. It's just I can't do it.
Check it out. Check it out. Over 1.5 in the heavyweight division, Daz Files is going to want to know this.
Okay. Yeah, good.
Is 56%, because the under 1.5 happens 44% of the time. So heavyweight fights go over 1.5 56% of the time since 2013 for 3-round fights, right? So you should be getting plus money on those. But if you are getting plus money on those, it's not a bad bet based on the divisional finish rate. So Daz, I see what you're doing, brother.
There you go, Daz, hitting some bets. I can't do it. I don't know. I can't bet very scary big guys going over 1.5 rounds. So we'll move on, though. We have the next fight on the card. And this is the opener to the pay-per-view. We have Mark Madsen going against Vinc Pichel. We have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 rounds is -200. The under 2.5 rounds is +160. The fight goes to decision -170, and the fight doesn't go to decision is +140. Weezy, what are we looking at here?
Okay, so let's look at these UFC finish rates, because we've got 3 fights for Madsen and we've got 7 for Pichel here, right? And when we look here, we see that 1 of 3 and 3 of 9, making 4 of 12 of Pichel and Madsen's combined fights have finished inside the distance. That's only 33%. That's 17% worse than the finish rate for the division. And actually, the implied probability of the line at 41%, we're overpaying for the fight doesn't go by about 8%, based on the UFC finish rates here. But based on the combined finish rates, because Madsen was such a savage finisher on the regional scene, and Pichel as well, we see that 16 of 27 combined fights have finished inside the distance. That's about 60%. That's better than the divisional finish rate. And that's actually 17.6% better than the implied probability of the line. But we always got to be careful about that, because it's harder to finish fights in the UFC than it is on the regional scene. Much tougher competition. So when we go down here to the fight doesn't go to decision, and we look, well, it looks like there's a little bit of value. I'm sorry, on the fight goes to decision here, because 8 of 12 of Pichel and Madsen's combined fights have went to decision. That's 66.7%. That's 17% better than the divisional decision rate, which is 50%. And versus the implied probability of the line, we're actually getting 3.7% better than the implied probability of the line. Yeah, this is one I would stay away from. It feels like a correctly priced line because these guys finished better on the regional scene, but now that they're here in the UFC, we don't see the same kind of finish rates. So we would probably have to consider that that's going to continue. The fight goes to decision is probably the bet here. And it is at what? It is plus 140. So you're getting a little bit of value on a plus money number here. It might be a decent look, but I was actually looking at this fight thinking, maybe Madsen finishes in round 1 or 2, or maybe Pichel finishes in the 3rd. So sometimes your eyes will have a different opinion than what the data is telling you. And sometimes the data is the better indication of where the value is than what your eyes are telling you. In this case, the data is telling us that this is probably a pretty fairly priced line right about here.
Sounds good to me. And shout out to Thomas saying Pichel round 3 party at Weezy's. Thomas, I'm already on that plus 1,600 on DraftKings. Hopefully Pichel finishes in the 3rd round. That is definitely a party in Weezy's prop right there.
Yeah, man, I'm going to be on that one as well too, because if Madsen does wrestle in the 1st and 2nd rounds, that's exhausting. The Greco-Roman style that he brings, especially with as much muscle as he has on his frame. And we know that Pichel brings conditioning for miles. And he's training up in Colorado, Factory X, training at elevation. This is going to be a very interesting fight.
I can't wait for this fight. I'm glad they put it on the main card. It's a really good one there. So we'll move on to the next fight. We have Mackenzie Dern going against Tecia Torres. And Weezy, when you first showed me this prop template, this was actually the fight you broke down on it. And I loved how you broke it down. And that's kind of how we formed the show here. But we have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 is minus 185. The under 2.5 is plus 155. The fight goes to decision, minus 155. And the fight doesn't go to decision, is plus 125. Curious to your thoughts on this one.
Okay, so we've got 6 fights in the UFC for Dern and 9 for Torres. So let's go over here to the UFC finish rate. So right here for the fight doesn't go to decision, we see compared, 6 of 22 fights, right? So we've got 2 different kinds of fighters here. We got Dern with a 50% finish rate for against, and we've got Tecia Torres with about a 15% finish rate for and against. So combined, 6 of 22 fights have finished inside the distance. That's only 27.3%. That's 3% worse than the divisional finish rate. But versus the implied probability of that fight doesn't go to decision line at minus 155, you're overpaying by 17% for the fight doesn't go to decision line. Way, way overpriced here. So what does that tell us, Brady? That tells us that there's probably some green down here, right? And check it out. Fight goes to decision. Losses. First thing we love, any fight doesn't go to decision is when we've got losses for both fighters and neither one has ever been finished inside the distance. Whenever we're betting fight goes, we want 2 durable fighters. Check. Whenever we bet fight goes, we want value on the line in comparison to their finish rates. So the decision rates of 2 fighters, 16 of their 22 combined UFC fights have went to decision. That's 72.7%. That's 3% better than the divisional finish rate. But for some reason, the implied probability of the fight goes to decision line, we're getting 12% edge here based on that 72.7% divisional decision rate for these 2 fighters. So this is one where I love the fight goes because we've got 2 durable fighters and we're getting a 12% deal on that FanDuel line right now at minus 148 or whatever it is.
Yeah, minus 146 on FanDuel. The fight goes to decision.
Yep, there we go.
Yeah, I mean,
minus 146, huh?
Yeah, 146.
Well, that's even better than because I got minus 155 up there, so that's even better. We're even getting a little bit better deal there.
Yeah, minus 146 is a 59.3 probability.
59.3, yeah. So that would be 12.7, 13.4% edge over the books.
That's huge, man. I mean, in this fight, you only have to worry about that Dern sub. Like, that was the one thing I'd be worried about. Why not, bet the fight goes to decision, maybe hedge with like a Dern sub, right?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that because that's how this fight most likely finishes is by a Dern sub. I mean, it's a mixed martial arts fight. We always have to say anything can happen, right?
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, when you listen to anybody break down that fight, including us, Brady, you would say, boy, you better hope, Tecia Torres, that you don't get taken down, because you don't want to be underneath Mackenzie Dern, at least not in a cage.
Yeah, for sure. So that is one that is very tempting, and we are getting some serious value on that fight goes to decision there. But we'll move on to the next fight, and this is my favorite fight on the card. It's probably a lot of people's favorite fight on the card. We have a Khamzat Chimaev going against Gilbert Burns. I just got done watching the press conference. It was hilarious. Chimaev was talking a ton of crap to Burns. If you've not seen it, I would recommend go check that out. And Chimaev is very confident. He's going to finish Burns in that first round. We have the over-under set at 1.5 rounds. The over 1.5, minus 130. Under 1.5 is plus 100. The fight goes to decision, plus 225. And the fight doesn't go to decision, is sitting at minus 300. Weezy, I am expecting violence in this fight.
I mean, I am too, So we're looking at a 75% implied probability that this fight finishes inside the distance, according to the current lines. And when we look at the UFC records of both of these guys, Khamzat 4 of 4, right? So we've got a killer be killed fighter in here, right? So even if we're overpaying for the line a little bit, we really don't mind, because the killer be killed fighter changes the style of the non-killer be killed fighter. And even Burns, 10 of 17 fights of his have finished inside the distance. So we've got 14 of 21, a 66.6 or 66.7% total finish rate. That's 18.2% better than the finish rate of the division. But according to that 66.7% number, we're overpaying on the implied probability of the line by about 8.3%. But we have to keep in mind that that number changes when you have somebody like Khamzat in there. And he's only got 4 fights and Burns has 17. So I would still say that the fight doesn't go as a parlay piece here, because Khamzat's in this fight. But they are going to try to coax us to bet that over, because they need some action on it. So we're getting a little bit of an edge here on the implied probability, but not enough to say that I'm going to sit there and put my hard-earned money on this fight going to decision. And I sit there watching the fight with my friends, Brady, going, I think Khamzat's an animal, but I just predict he's going to slow it down this fight. And then he goes out there and just shaves ass in 30 seconds. So of course they're going to try to price the fight goes to make it look a little more attractive. But frankly, I think they could do way better. I want better than 2.6% edge from the books if I'm betting that Chimaev is going to go a full 3 rounds when we've never even seen him past the 7-minute mark. So even though the sheet shows that we're overpaying a little bit for the line, fuck that, man. This is a fight doesn't go to decision bet, dude, all day long.
Yeah, this was one I researched last week, and I saw the fight doesn't go up minus 190. Minus 190. I was like, what? I was kind of expecting like minus 300. Went and taped and everything checked out, and I placed a pretty big bet on it. Wish I placed a bigger bet on it now that I see the line where it's going at. But yeah, minus 190 last week, and that was like a 65.5 implied probability. I should have smashed it harder, but I smashed it a decent amount.
Yeah, well, you know what, dude? We're going to have this shit here. We're going to have that ready, and then as soon as these lines come out, we're going to be typing the betting lines into this prop template, and we're going to immediately identify value. And that's what we got to do. But that was just our eyes don't lie to us all the time. I mean, sometimes you're going to watch a fight and you're going to be like, man, this one's not going to decision. And then you're going to plug in the numbers and be like, yeah, it's not going to decision, And that's the case with a fighter like Khamzat. So whenever we have those killer be killed fighters, these numbers don't mean as much. Okay.
Yep. I mean, like you said earlier, there's just some guys, killer be killed. Terrence McKinney, you bet the under. Randy Costa, you bet the under. Chimaev, you bet the under. And we've made a lot of money betting those Terrence McKinney unders, those Costa unders. You just got to do it. There's some guys like that. But we have Tajik Bey.
Yes.
What is up? We got the GOAT hanging out on the MMA Engine channel. And Jesse saying smash it like prom night. I totally agree. And I think Khamzat does smash come Saturday night. Can't wait for that fight. But we have the co-main event here. These last 3 fights on this card, they're so good. We have Petr Yan going against Aljamain Sterling, and really looking forward to seeing what happens here in this fight. But we have the over-under. It looks like it is set at 4.5 rounds. The over 4.5, minus 130. Under 4.5 is plus 100. The fight goes to decision, minus 120. The fight doesn't go to decision, minus 110. So it's about a pick 'em here for the fight goes or doesn't go. Weezy, what are we looking at here? I think you're muted. I think you're muted. I think you're muted.
Sorry, muted myself, then couldn't find the cursor for like 5 seconds.
You're good.
Whenever we see these yellow blocks right here, like we've got here, like we've got here, it means that the implied probability and the divisional finish rates are priced right where, you know, the line is, you know, and where the two fighters statistics lies. So right now I'm seeing the fact that these guys don't get finished, right? Big red blocks here for the fight doesn't go to decision. So even though we see the yellow here, these red blocks are like a big no when you're betting fight doesn't go, because it means these guys don't get finished, right? They're both durable. So if you're going to see two red spots like here and here, you better be seeing green everywhere else if you're thinking about betting that. But we're not. We're seeing lines that look like they're just a little bit overpriced on the fight doesn't go. And when we go down here to the fight goes, we see the green here, we see the green here, and then we see a little bit. So we've got 14 out of 24 of Sterling and Jan's fights have went to decision, Brady. That's 58.3%. And we see that there's not much divergence here. For one of the guys, it's 55.6. For the other one, it's 60. So right in the middle. Versus the divisional finish rate, which is about, or the divisional decision rate, which is about 45% or 51%, we got a 7% edge. And then we got a 3.8% edge over the books on the fight goes to decision line in comparison to the divisional finish rates and the implied probabilities. But it's a 5-round fight. So we always have to keep that in mind. This is one that looks like it's fairly priced, but with those green blocks, I would say goes to decision simply because, or an over, because both of these guys have been durable.
Yep, I like to hear that. I do have the over 2.5 parlayed with the under 2.5 in the fluffy fight. I don't do many parlays, but that was one that did stick out to me. But yeah, I think I'm with you. I think this does more than likely go over and does get very extended, if not go to decision. But we have the main event here. We have Alexander Volkanovski going against the Korean Zombie. And we have the over-under is set at 4.5 rounds as well. The over 4.5 minus 140, the under 4.5 plus 110. The fight goes to decision, minus 150, and the fight doesn't go to decision, is plus 120. Really curious to see what happens here, Weezy.
Did I screw up this sheet, dude? I've got fight doesn't go to decision at minus 135 for Volkanovski Zombie.
Yeah, it's, fight doesn't go is plus 120.
Shit. Okay, I've got to re-upload this one, man. Or wait, no, here, let me just bring up, because I've got another one. I've got the, here, UFC 0409 props. Bam. So I messed up the lines, so the spreadsheet isn't going to be correct.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to update those lines to what you just told me that they are. So for Volkanovski Zombie, fight doesn't go is what?
Plus 120.
120, and fight goes is what?
Minus 150.
Minus 150. All right. Cool. So now we've got correct numbers in here. And I will zoom in on this so you guys can see it. All right. So this is the fight doesn't go. Overall finish rates are combined finish rates. 32 of 47 fights have finished inside the distance. That's 68.1%. 25% better than the divisional finish rate, and 22.6% better than the implied probability of the line. When we go over here to the UFC finish rates, we see that 11 of the 20 combined fights have finished inside the distance. That's 55%, 12% better than the 43% finish rate, and 9.5% better than the implied probability of the line, which is, like you said, it's at plus 120. Yeah. So that is telling us that this is sticking out as a bet for an under. 9.5% is a nice edge to get over the books. And when we go down here, we see that only one of these 3 fights have went to decision, which is much less than the divisional finish, the divisional decision rate. And right here, we see that negative 15% number. So 45% is the amount of fights that have went to decision out of 20 between these two guys. And that is 12% worse than the decision rate and 15% worse than the implied probability of the line. So right now, it looks like the under and the fight doesn't go is the bet here. And then we got to remember, Zombie's taking the fight on short notice. And Volkanovski, I think he's in a spot where he feels like he needs to show out here. This isn't Max Holloway. It's not the third fight. It's not the trilogy. It's a guy that didn't earn this spot, but took it because Holloway got hurt. So, coming off a win off of Ige, but losing to Ortega, Zombie wouldn't be getting a title shot normally. So if you think that Volkanovski is going to maybe step on that gas just a little bit extra to prove a point, and then you also see that you're getting a 9.5% edge over the 45% implied probability that the books are offering you when these guys are finishing their fights at a 55% rate, and Brady, we're adding to the equation here. This is a 5-round fight, not a 3-round fight. So this sheet is identifying some nice value on the fight doesn't go to decision here.
I like to hear that. I have the fight ends in KO at plus 180. But yeah, the plus 120, it still sticks out, man. I mean, like you said, even, on top of the stats and everything, like Zombie is coming in on so much short notice. What is his game plan going to be? I think he's going to go balls to the wall trying to finish Volkanovski in the first couple of rounds. I think he's going to make this a war like most Zombie fights are. I very well could see this fight ending inside the distance. And I honestly can't believe plus 120. Plus 120 fight doesn't go. I think that's pretty solid.
Yeah, I think it is too, so that's really what we're looking at here, Brady. We're going to look at these divisional finish rates, which I have now for all the 3-round fights between 2013 and today. We've got the 5-round fights stripped out. We got really nice, clean analytics, and we've got a little calculator that converts betting lines into implied probabilities. And now the spreadsheet does the work. And now we just read off of it, man. And I think that this is going to help us make some money going forward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I really enjoyed doing this show. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. We'll keep doing it every Thursday. If you guys do enjoy it, leave a like, subscribe here to the MMA Engine, doing other content as well. Check us out. Weezy, let everybody know where they can find you, what you have going on throughout the week.
Well, this is my last show of the week until Best Bet, 1 hour before the fights start on Saturday on your channel, Brady. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Uncle Weezy. I do balls deep breakdowns of fights. I do a full card breakdown every Tuesday night at 10 o'clock Central called Just the Tip. But where you really want to be catching me is on the new MMA Engine YouTube channel where you are right now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we've got a lot of great MMA content coming out to you guys, a website coming very soon. We're really looking forward to providing you guys with a ton of value and giving you guys as much information as you need in order to make the best possible gambling decisions.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we really do appreciate the likes, the subscriptions to the channel as well. So if you guys can do that, it does mean a lot. And like we said, we have a website coming in the very near future. So that's something to look forward to. Do want to shout out the chat once again. Josh saying get a donation button. We need 1,000 subscribers before we can get that donation button. And hopefully we get 1K in the near future if you guys do help us out. But appreciate all you hanging out. Daz in there. We have Quaver. We have Josh in the chat hanging out as well. We got Tajik Bey was in here earlier. We got Monk, another guy on the MMA Engine. I saw Lou Becci on there, Cuban Assassin. All you guys, Thomas, the Violence Man himself. Thank you all for hanging out. Leave a like, subscribe. We'll see you very soon. Good luck for UFC 273. Let's make some money.